Hey there, and welcome back to English in Fluency. I'm Alex, and I am so glad you pressed play today. If this is your first time here, this show is built for one purpose: to help you listen, understand, and actually speak English with more confidence. One episode at a time. And if you're a regular listener, hey, welcome back. It's good to have you in the booth with me again. Today's episode is a big one. So, get comfortable, maybe grab a coffee or a tea, and let's dive in together. We are calling this one our full practice episode, because we are covering 3 different areas that B1 level learners need the most. First, we're going to listen to a short news story. The kind of thing you might hear on the radio or read online. Then, we're going to enjoy a short story together. A little piece of fiction with real characters and real emotions. And finally, we're going to listen in on a natural conversation between 2 friends. The kind of conversation you might actually have in real life. Along the way, I'm going to stop and explain new words, useful phrases, and grammar patterns. And every single time I give you an example, I want you to say it out loud with me. Ready? Let's start with repeat. I am ready to listen and learn today. Go ahead, say that with me, out loud, right now. Good. That's exactly the energy we need for this episode. Before we jump in, let me quickly explain why we structure the show this way. So many English learners spend years studying grammar rules and memorizing vocabulary lists, and yet still feel completely lost the moment they try to have a real conversation, or watch the news, or listen to 2 friends chatting naturally. That gap between studying English and actually using English is exactly what we're trying to close here, episode by episode. By mixing news, fiction, and natural dialogue all in one sitting, we're training your ear to handle the different rhythms, speeds, and styles of real spoken English, not just one narrow type of speech. And by stopping constantly to explain and repeat phrases together, we're making sure that new vocabulary doesn't just pass through your ears and disappear. It actually settles into your active memory, ready for you to use the next time you need it. So let's begin with our news story. I want you to imagine you're listening to the local news in a mid-sized city, somewhere that could be anywhere in the world, really. And the topic today is about a change happening in the community. Here we go. In the city of Brightwell, something is changing on Maple Street. For years, the street was known for one thing: heavy traffic and very few trees. But last month, the city council announced a new plan. They want to turn Maple Street into a green street, with more trees, wider sidewalks, and a bike lane running through the middle. The project will take about 8 months to finish, and it will cost the city almost $2 million. Local business owner Sandra Lopez, who runs a small bakery on the corner, says she is excited about the changes. She told our reporter, quote, "I think this is going to bring more people to the street. And honestly, more trees means more shade. And more shade means people will want to walk here instead of just driving through." End quote. Not everyone agrees, though. Some residents are worried about the construction noise. And a few drivers say they are frustrated because the new bike lane will take away 1 lane for cars. The city says the project will begin construction in early September and should be finished by the following spring. Okay, let's pause there for a moment and break that down together. First, Did you notice the phrase heavy traffic? That simply means a lot of cars on the road, moving slowly because there are too many of them. We use this phrase constantly in everyday English. For example, I might say, I was late to work today because of heavy traffic. Repeat. I was late to work today because of heavy traffic. Great job. Now, let's talk about another useful word from the story, the word residence. A resident is a person who lives in a particular place. So the residents of Maple Street are simply the people who live on that street. You'll hear this word a lot in news stories, especially about local communities. Try this sentence with me. The residents of the building complained about the noise. Repeat. The residents of the building complained about the noise. Perfect. Now, here's a grammar point I want you to notice. Did you catch the sentence? The project will begin construction in early September and should be finished by the following spring. This is using the future simple tense. Will begin, combined with should, which shows a prediction or an expectation rather than a guarantee. This is really common in news reports, because journalists often aren't 100% sure exactly when something will happen. So they use should instead of will to sound a little more careful. Let's practice that pattern together. Try saying, the meeting should start at 9, but it might be a little late. Repeat. The meeting should start at 9, but it might be a little late. Excellent work. Let's continue with the story and see what happens next. 2 weeks after the announcement, the city held a public meeting so residents could share their opinions. More than 100 people attended, which surprised even the mayor, who said, quote, I've never seen this many people show up for a street planning meeting before. End quote. During the meeting, several people asked questions about parking. One man, who has lived on Maple Street for over 20 years, said he was worried he would lose his usual parking spot in front of his house. City planner Michael Chen explained that the project includes new parking spaces on a side street, just 2 blocks away, and that residents with disabilities would still have reserved spots directly on Maple Street. After almost 2 hours of discussion, the council voted to move forward with the project, with a few small changes based on what they heard from the community. Now here's something I really want you to notice, and it's a phrase that comes up constantly in spoken English. The phrase move forward with. When we say the council voted to move forward with the project, it means they decided to continue with the plan, to keep going, rather than stopping it or changing their minds completely. This phrase is used in business meetings, in politics, and in everyday conversations about decisions. For example, you might say, after thinking about it for a week, we decided to move forward with the new marketing plan. Repeat. We decided to move forward with the new marketing plan. Wonderful. One more phrase before we move on. Reserved spots. When something is reserved, it means it's kept specifically for someone, so nobody else can use it. Think about a restaurant. When you call ahead and ask for a table, you are asking them to reserve a table for you. Try this one. I reserved a table for 4 people at 8 o'clock. Repeat. I reserved a table for 4 people at 8 o'clock. That's it exactly. Let's finish this news story together. 6 months later, Maple Street looks completely different. There are now 30 new trees planted along both sides of the road. A smooth new bike lane painted bright green, and wider sidewalks where people can walk comfortably, even with a stroller or a wheelchair. Sandra's Bakery has seen a 20% increase in customers since the construction finished, and she recently hired 2 new employees to keep up with demand. The city is now considering similar projects for 3 other streets, based on how successful this one turned out to be. And that, my friend, is where we leave our news story for today. A small street that transformed into something the whole community seems proud of. Before we move to our next segment, let's do a quick recap of the phrases we practiced. We learned heavy traffic. We learned residence. We practiced the future pattern with will and should together. We learned move forward with. And we learned reserved spots. If you want, pause the episode right now and say all 5 of those phrases out loud, one more time, just to lock them into your memory. Go ahead. I'll wait right here for you. All right. Welcome back. Now let's shift gears completely and move into our short story segment. This is one of my favorite parts of the show, because stories help us remember vocabulary so much better than lists ever could. Our brains are built for stories. So let's use that to our advantage. Today's story is called The Bicycle, and it's about a young woman named Maria who has just moved to a new city for a new job. Let's begin. Maria arrived in the city on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, with 2 suitcases, a small box of kitchen items, and absolutely no idea how anything worked. She had accepted a job as a graphic designer at a small company downtown, and although she was excited about the opportunity, she also felt completely overwhelmed. The city was loud, the streets were confusing, and worst of all, she didn't own a car. For the first week, she took the bus everywhere. But the bus was often late, and sometimes it simply didn't show up at all. One evening, after waiting almost 40 minutes in the rain for a bus that never came, Maria finally decided enough was enough. She was going to buy a bicycle. The next Saturday, she walked to a small shop near her apartment, a place called Wheels and Deals, recommended by one of her new co-workers. The shop owner, an older man named Tom, greeted her warmly as she walked in. "Are you looking for something specific?" he asked. "Or just browsing today?" Maria explained that she needed a reliable bike for getting to work. Something comfortable, not too expensive, and not too complicated. Tom smiled and said, "I think I have exactly what you need." He showed her a simple blue bicycle with a basket on the front, perfect for carrying her bag or even a small grocery order. Maria loved it immediately. Let's pause here for a second. Did you notice the question Tom asked? Are you looking for something specific? Or just browsing today? This is such a useful phrase for real life, especially when you're shopping. Shop workers ask this all the time, and knowing how to answer confidently will make your shopping experiences so much smoother. If you're just looking around without a specific plan, you can simply say, "I'm just browsing. Thank you." Repeat, "I'm just browsing. Thank you." And if you do need something specific, you might say, "Actually, yes, I'm looking for a birthday gift for my sister." Repeat, "I'm looking for a birthday gift for my sister." Beautiful. Notice also the word reliable, which Maria used to describe the kind of bike she wanted. Reliable means something you can trust, something that works consistently, and doesn't let you down. We use this word for people too, not just objects. For example, my brother is always on time. He's incredibly reliable. Repeat. My brother is always on time. He's incredibly reliable. Perfect. Let's continue the story now. Maria bought the bike that afternoon, along with a helmet and a small lock. And Tom even gave her a quick lesson on how to fix a flat tire, just in case. Riding home for the first time, she felt something she hadn't felt since arriving in the city. A small spark of joy. The wind on her face. The freedom of choosing her own route. It reminded her a little bit of being a child again. Over the following weeks, riding to work became the best part of her day. She discovered a small park she never would have noticed from the bus window, and she found a coffee shop along her route that made the best cinnamon rolls she had ever tasted. One morning, about a month after buying the bike, Maria was riding to work when she noticed a woman struggling to fix her own bicycle on the side of the road. The chain had come off, and the woman, who looked to be in her 60s, was clearly frustrated, her hands already covered in grease. Without even thinking twice, Maria stopped. "Do you need some help?" she asked. The woman looked up, surprised. "Oh, that would be wonderful," she said. "I have no idea what I'm doing here." Maria knelt down beside the bike and, remembering Tom's lesson from weeks earlier, carefully guided the chain back onto place. Within a few minutes, the bike was working again. I love this moment in the story, because it shows something really important about the phrase, "without even thinking twice," which means to do something immediately, without hesitating, without stopping to consider it carefully first. It shows instinct, kindness, and quick decision-making all at once. For example, when my friend needed help moving apartments, I said yes without even thinking twice. Repeat. I said yes without even thinking twice. That's a phrase you'll sound really natural using in conversation. We also heard the phrase "within a few minutes," which simply means a short amount of time had passed. Less than what you might expect. Try this sentence. The doctor called me back within a few minutes, which surprised me. Repeat. The doctor called me back within a few minutes, which surprised me. Wonderful. Let's find out what happens next between Maria and this woman. The woman introduced herself as Elaine, and it turned out she lived just 2 streets away from Maria's apartment. As they walked together, pushing their bikes side by side, they discovered they had quite a bit in common. Elaine had also once moved to a brand new city, decades earlier, not knowing a single person. She told Maria that it took her almost a year to feel truly comfortable there, but eventually, the city became home. Before they went their separate ways that morning, Elaine invited Maria to a small neighborhood gathering happening that weekend, a casual event where residents met up in the local park for coffee and conversation. Maria, feeling a little nervous but also excited, decided to say yes. That weekend, Maria attended the gathering, and although she felt shy walking in alone at first, Elaine quickly introduced her to several neighbors. By the end of the afternoon, Maria had exchanged phone numbers with 3 new people, including a man named David, who worked at a bookstore just around the corner from her apartment, and a woman named Priya, who, it turned out, also loved cycling and invited Maria to join her for weekend rides along the river trail. Riding home that evening, Maria realized something important. This city, which had felt so overwhelming and lonely just a month earlier, was finally starting to feel like somewhere she truly belonged. That's the end of our story for today, and I hope you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed writing it for you. Before we move on, let's review two more phrases together. We learned the phrase to feel truly comfortable, which describes that deep sense of ease in a place or situation. Try saying, "It took me a while, but I finally feel truly comfortable in my new job." Repeat, "I finally feel truly comfortable in my new job." And we also learn to feel like somewhere you truly belong. A beautiful way to describe that sense of home. Try this one. After living here for 2 years, this city finally feels like somewhere I truly belong. Repeat. This city finally feels like somewhere I truly belong. Wonderful work. Truly. You're doing great. Now, let's move into our final segment for today. A natural conversation practice. This time, I want you to imagine you're listening in on two friends, Jake and Priya, who are planning a weekend trip together. Pay close attention to how they speak naturally, including the small words and expressions native speakers use all the time in real conversation. Jake said, "Hey, so I was thinking, what if we actually went to the mountains this weekend instead of just staying in the city?" Priya replied, "Oh, that sounds amazing, honestly. But do you think the weather is going to cooperate?" "I heard there might be rain on Saturday," Jake said. "Yeah, I checked the forecast earlier, and it looks like Saturday morning might have a little rain, but it should clear up by the afternoon. What do you think? Are you in?" Priya laughed and said, "Of course I'm in. When have I ever said no to a good hiking trip? Let's just make sure we bring extra layers. You know how cold it gets up there once the sun goes down." Let's stop right there for a moment, because there's so much natural language packed into just those few lines. First, notice the phrase, "Does the weather is going to cooperate?" When we say the weather cooperates, we mean it behaves in a helpful way. It doesn't ruin our plans. This is such a natural, native-sounding way to talk about weather and plans together. Try it with me. I hope the weather cooperates this weekend. We have a picnic planned. Repeat. I hope the weather cooperates this weekend. We have a picnic planned. Excellent. Next, notice the phrase, "Are you in?" which is a quick, casual way of asking someone if they want to join an activity or plan. It's much more natural than saying, "Do you want to participate?" Try this. "We're going bowling on Friday." Are you in? Repeat. "We're going bowling on Friday." Are you in? And finally, notice the phrase extra layers, which refers to additional pieces of clothing you wear on top of each other to stay warm. This is such a useful phrase for talking about weather and clothing. Try saying, "It's supposed to be freezing tonight, so bring extra layers." Repeat. "It's supposed to be freezing tonight, so bring extra layers." Fantastic. Let's continue listening to Jake and Priya plan their trip. Priya continued, "Okay, so if we're doing the mountains, should we leave Friday night? Or does it make more sense to head out early Saturday morning?" Jake thought about it and said, "Honestly, I think Friday night makes more sense. That way we avoid all the weekend traffic, and we can wake up already there, ready to start hiking first thing." Priya agreed. That's actually a really good point. I hadn't thought about the traffic. Okay, so Friday night it is. Should we bring our own tent? Or do you think we could just book a cabin somewhere? Jake replied, let's check prices for both. But honestly, after camping in the rain last time, I'm kind of leaning toward a cabin this time around. Here's a phrase worth pausing on. First thing, which means immediately, right at the beginning, before anything else. When Jake says they can start hiking first thing, he means they'll begin hiking as soon as they wake up, without delay. This phrase appears constantly in spoken English. Try this sentence. I'll send you the email first thing tomorrow morning. Repeat. I'll send you the email first thing tomorrow morning. We also heard the phrase leaning toward, which is a soft, natural way of saying you're starting to prefer one option over another, without fully deciding yet. For example, we're still deciding on a restaurant, but I'm leaning toward the Italian place. Repeat. I'm leaning toward the Italian place. Perfect. These small phrases are exactly what make spoken English sound natural and fluent, rather than textbook stiff. Let's finish listening to their conversation. After a bit more discussion, Jake and Priya decided to book a small cabin for 2 nights, splitting the cost evenly between them. They agreed to leave Friday around 6 in the evening, right after Priya finished work, and to stop halfway for dinner at a diner they both loved along the highway. Priya said, "Okay, I'll start making a list of everything we need to pack. Can you handle the food and snacks for the drive?" Jake agreed immediately. "Sounds good. I've got the snacks covered. Don't worry about that part at all." As they wrapped up their planning, Priya added one final thought. "You know, I think this is exactly what we both needed. A little break from routine." Jake laughed and agreed completely. That phrase, a little break from routine, is such a natural, relatable way to describe taking time away from your normal daily schedule, whether that's work, responsibilities, or just the usual rhythm of life. Try saying, after such a busy month at work, I really need a little break from routine. Repeat. I really need a little break from routine. Wonderful. And one final phrase before we close. I've got that covered. Which means, don't worry. I will take care of that specific task. It's a really confident, reassuring phrase to use with friends, family, or co-workers. Try this one. Don't worry about the drinks for the party. I've got that covered. Repeat. I've got that covered. Beautifully done. Before we wrap up completely, I want to give you a little bonus today. 3 extra segments to really push your listening skills further. So, stick with me a bit longer, because the more you practice in one sitting, the faster your ear adjusts to natural English. Let's start with a second news story. This one about a small business rather than a city project. In the town of Riverside, a local bakery called Golden Crust has been struggling for the past 2 years, ever since a large supermarket chain opened just down the street. The owner, a man named Carlos Rivera, took over the bakery from his father almost 15 years ago, and he says walking away from it was never something he considered, even during the most difficult months. Instead of giving up, Carlos decided to try something different. He started posting short videos online, showing exactly how his bread was made. From mixing the dough early in the morning to pulling fresh loaves out of the oven just a few hours later. Within just a few weeks, one particular video, showing his grandmother's secret recipe for cinnamon bread, received over 2 million views. Suddenly, people from all over the region were driving to Riverside specifically to try it. Carlos told our reporter, quote, "I never expected this. I just wanted people to see the process, to understand why our bread tastes different." End quote. Sales at Golden Crust have now tripled compared to last year. And Carlos recently hired his first employee outside the family, a young woman named Beth, who had just graduated culinary school. Let's pause and look at a few useful expressions from that story. First, the phrase struggling for the past 2 years. When we say a business is struggling, it means it's having serious difficulty, often financial difficulty, and it's not doing well. Try this sentence. The restaurant has been struggling since the highway closed nearby. Repeat. The restaurant has been struggling since the highway closed nearby. Next, notice the phrase walking away from it, which is a common way of describing giving up on something, quitting, or abandoning a project or responsibility. For example, after years of hard work, she wasn't ready to walk away from her dream. Repeat. She wasn't ready to walk away from her dream. And finally, let's look at the phrase from all over the region, which describes people coming from many different places within a general area. Try this one. People traveled from all over the region just to see the festival. Repeat. People traveled from all over the region just to see the festival. Wonderful. You're building real, natural vocabulary here. Let's continue the story a little further. As word continued to spread about Golden Crust, a local news channel decided to do a full-feature story on Carlos and his bakery. During the interview, Carlos explained that his father always told him that good bread takes patience. You can't rush the dough, and you definitely can't rush trust with your customers either. He said this lesson has guided every decision he's made since taking over the business. Beth, his new employee, mentioned that working at Golden Crust felt completely different from her culinary school experience, because here, everything is made by hand, in small batches, with recipes that have been passed down for 3 generations. The bakery now plans to open a second location next year, something Carlos says he never would have imagined possible just 12 months ago. One last phrase from this story worth practicing: made by hand, which means something is created manually, without machines, often implying extra care and quality. Try saying, "These shoes are made by hand, which is why they cost a little more." Repeat. These shoes are made by hand, which is why they cost a little more. Fantastic work. Let's move back to Maria's story now, because we left off right after that neighborhood gathering, and I think you'll want to know what happens next in her new life. A few weeks after the gathering in the park, Maria arrived at her office on a Monday morning feeling more confident than she had in a long time. Her manager, a woman named Rebecca, stopped by her desk and mentioned that the company was starting a new project, a complete redesign for a client in the hospitality industry, and she wanted Maria to be part of the small team working on it. Maria felt a mix of excitement and nervousness, since this would be her very first big project since joining the company. That afternoon, she sat down with 2 other designers, David from marketing, and a quiet but incredibly talented illustrator named Sam, to begin brainstorming ideas. At first, Maria hesitated to share her thoughts during the meeting, worried her ideas weren't good enough compared to David and Sam, who had both been at the company for years. But when Rebecca specifically asked for her opinion on the color palette, Maria took a deep breath and shared an idea she'd been thinking about, using warm, earthy tones inspired by the client's original branding, rather than the cold blues the previous designer had suggested. To her surprise, both David and Sam loved the idea immediately. Sam even said, "Honestly, that's exactly the direction I was hoping someone would suggest. I just didn't want to push it myself." Let's pause here for a moment, because there's a wonderful phrase worth practicing: took a deep breath. We use this phrase not just literally, but also to describe gathering courage before doing something difficult or nerve-wracking, like speaking up in a meeting. Try this sentence: I took a deep breath before walking into the interview room. Repeat. I took a deep breath before walking into the interview room. We also heard the phrase "didn't want to push it," which means someone hesitated to insist on their own idea or opinion, often out of politeness or uncertainty. Try saying, I had a suggestion too, but I didn't want to push it during the meeting. Repeat. I didn't want to push it during the meeting. Beautifully done. Let's see how Maria's project turns out. Over the following month, Maria, David, and Sam worked closely together, meeting almost every single day to refine their designs. Maria discovered that David had a fantastic sense of humor, which made even the longest, most stressful meetings feel manageable. And Sam, despite being quiet at first, turned out to be one of the most thoughtful, encouraging co-workers she had ever worked with. By the time the project was finally presented to the client, Maria felt genuinely proud of what they had created together. The client loved the final design, especially the warm color palette Maria had originally suggested. And Rebecca made a point of telling the whole team how impressed she was with their collaboration. That evening, to celebrate finishing the project, David suggested they all grab dinner together at a small Thai restaurant near the office. As they sat around the table, laughing about some of the more chaotic moments from the past month, Maria realized something that made her smile quietly to herself. She thought back to that rainy Tuesday afternoon when she first arrived in the city, completely alone, completely unsure of herself, and she compared it to this exact moment, surrounded by people who genuinely felt like friends. The city that once felt so overwhelming now felt, without question, like home. One final phrase from this part of the story made a point of, which means someone did something intentionally and deliberately, often to make sure it was noticed or acknowledged. Try this sentence. She made a point of thanking everyone individually after the presentation. Repeat. She made a point of thanking everyone individually after the presentation. Wonderful. Maria's story is a great reminder that new beginnings, although difficult at first, often lead somewhere beautiful if we give them enough time. Now, let's return to our conversation practice, because there's a little more to hear from Jake and Priya before we close out today's episode, this time Let's listen to a slightly different kind of conversation, one that happens between a job candidate and an interviewer, since this is such an important situation for many English learners to feel prepared for. The interviewer, a woman named Ms. Patel, began by saying, "Thank you so much for coming in today. Why don't you start by telling me a little bit about yourself and your background?" The candidate, a young man named Omar, took a moment to collect his thoughts before answering. "Of course. Thank you for having me," he said. "I recently graduated with a degree in computer science, and for the past year, I've been working part-time at a small tech startup, mainly focusing on front-end development. I'm really looking to grow my skills further, and this position seemed like a perfect opportunity to do exactly that." Ms. Patel nodded and asked, "That's great. Can you walk me through a challenge you faced in your previous role, and how you handled it?" Omar thought for a second and replied, "Sure. Actually, there was a time when our main website crashed just hours before a big product launch. It was honestly pretty stressful. But instead of panicking, I worked closely with my team. We split up the problem into smaller pieces, and we managed to fix it with about 20 minutes to spare before launch." Ms. Patel smiled and said, "That's impressive. Staying calm under pressure is such an important skill." Let's pause here, because job interviews are packed full of useful expressions. First, notice the phrase, "take a moment to collect his thoughts," which describes pausing briefly to organize what you want to say before speaking, especially in a slightly formal or important situation. Try this sentence. "She took a moment to collect her thoughts before answering the difficult question." Repeat. "She took a moment to collect her thoughts before answering the difficult question." Next, we heard "walk me through," which is a very common interview phrase, meaning explain something step by step, in detail. Try saying, "Can you walk me through how you solved that problem?" Repeat. "Can you walk me through how you solved that problem?" And finally, with about 20 minutes to spare, which means something was completed with extra time remaining before a deadline. Try this one. "We finished the project with about an hour to spare." Repeat. "We finished the project with about an hour to spare." Excellent! These phrases will genuinely help you feel more prepared for real interviews in English. Let's finish listening to Omar's interview. Toward the end of their conversation, Ms. Patel asked, "Do you have any questions for me?" Omar nodded and said, "Actually, yes. I'd love to know more about the team I'd be working with, and what a typical day might look like in this role." Ms. Patel seemed pleased by the question and spent the next few minutes describing the team's structure, their communication style, and even mentioned that they usually grab lunch together every Friday as a team tradition. As the interview wrapped up, Ms. Patel said, "Well, Omar, it was genuinely a pleasure speaking with you today. We'll be in touch within the next week regarding next steps." Omar thanked her sincerely and left the office feeling cautiously optimistic about how everything had gone. One last phrase worth practicing: cautiously optimistic, which describes feeling hopeful about something, but still being careful not to expect too much, just in case things don't work out. Try this sentence. "After the interview, I felt cautiously optimistic, but I tried not to get my hopes up too much." Repeat. "I felt cautiously optimistic, but I tried not to get my hopes up too much. Wonderful. That's such a natural, mature way to describe hope mixed with a little bit of realistic caution. Before we head into our final wrap-up, let's do one more thing together. A short listening comprehension and speaking practice segment, because testing yourself is one of the fastest ways to lock everything we covered today deep into your memory. I'm going to ask you a series of questions based on everything we listened to today, and I want you to actually answer out loud, in full sentences, using your own words. Don't worry about getting every single word perfect. The goal here is fluency and confidence, not perfection. Let's start with the news stories. Question 1. What change is happening on Maple Street in the city of Brightwell? And how did the residents feel about it? Pause the episode now and answer out loud in a full sentence. Take your time. There's no rush at all. Once you're ready, press play again, and we'll continue. Great. I hope you mentioned the new trees, the bike lane, and the mixed reactions from residents. Some excited, some worried about noise and parking. Question 2. How did Carlos save his family bakery, Golden Crust, and what specifically made his business successful again? Pause now and try answering that out loud, using at least 2 full sentences if you can. Wonderful! Hopefully you mentioned the online videos, especially the one about his grandmother's cinnamon bread recipe, and how it brought in customers from all over the region. Now, let's move to Maria's story. Question 3. How did Maria and Elaine first meet? And what happened because of that meeting? Go ahead. Pause and answer that out loud now. Perfect. I hope you remembered that Maria stopped to help fix Elaine's bicycle chain, and that this small act of kindness eventually led to Maria being invited to a neighborhood gathering, where she made several new friends. Question 4. What happened during Maria's first big project at work, and how did she feel by the end of it? Take a moment, pause, and answer out loud. Excellent. Hopefully you mentioned her nervousness at first, her idea about the warm color palette, and how proud and comfortable she felt by the end, especially during that dinner with David and Sam. Now let's move to our conversation practice. Question 5. Why did Jake and Priya decide to leave for their mountain trip on Friday night instead of Saturday morning? Pause now and try answering with a full sentence. Great job. I hope you remembered they wanted to avoid weekend traffic and start hiking first thing in the morning once they arrived. And finally, question 6. What specific example did Omar give during his job interview to show he could handle pressure well? Pause the episode and answer that one out loud too. Wonderful. Hopefully you mentioned the story about the website crashing right before the product launch, and how his team fixed it with about 20 minutes to spare. If you were able to answer most or all of those questions, even with a few small grammar mistakes, that is a fantastic sign that your listening comprehension is genuinely improving. And if you struggled with a few of them, that's completely okay too. Honestly, that's incredibly normal. And it simply means you now know exactly which parts of the episode to go back and listen to again. Now, let's do one final round of speaking practice. A rapid-fire round where I'll give you a phrase from today's episode, and I want you to create your own original sentence using it, out loud, right on the spot. This is a little more challenging, But it's exactly the kind of practice that builds real, spontaneous fluency, the kind you can use in actual conversations, not just memorized examples. Ready? Here's the first one. Heavy traffic. Pause now and create your own sentence. Next. Reliable. Pause and create your sentence. Next. Are you in? Pause and create your sentence. Next. Leaning toward. Pause and create your own sentence now. And finally, cautiously optimistic. Pause one more time and give it your best shot. However those sentences turned out, I want you to know something important. Every single time you push yourself to speak, even if it feels uncomfortable, even if you make mistakes, you are building real fluency, the kind that no textbook alone can ever give you. Speaking out loud, even alone in your room with a podcast, is genuinely one of the most powerful things you can do for your English right now. Before we truly close things out, I have one more small bonus for you, a quick continuation of Jake and Priya's trip, just so we can hear how their weekend actually turned out. And then I want to leave you with a few honest thoughts about learning English before we say goodbye for today. Friday evening arrived, and just as planned, Jake picked up Priya right after she finished work. The drive to the mountains took almost 3 hours, and, true to his word, Jake had packed an impressive amount of snacks, chips, trail mix, chocolate, and even a thermos of coffee for the road. About halfway through the drive, they stopped at the diner they both loved, the same one Jake had mentioned earlier in the week. Priya ordered her usual, a stack of pancakes with extra syrup, while Jake, feeling a little more adventurous that evening, decided to try the diner's spicy chicken sandwich for the very first time. By the time they arrived at the cabin, it was already dark outside, and the temperature had dropped noticeably. "Good thing we packed those extra layers," Priya said, pulling her jacket tighter as they unloaded the car. The cabin itself was small but cozy, with a stone fireplace, a wooden table, and large windows that, come morning, would offer a stunning view of the surrounding mountains. They spent the rest of the evening building a small fire, chatting about work, life, and everything in between, before eventually falling asleep, exhausted from the long drive. Saturday morning brought exactly the rain Jake had predicted, a light drizzle that covered the mountains in a soft gray mist. Rather than feeling disappointed, Priya suggested they simply wait it out with coffee on the cabin's covered porch, watching the rain instead of rushing to start hiking right away. By early afternoon, just as the forecast promised, the clouds finally cleared, revealing a bright blue sky and mountains that seemed to glow under the fresh sunlight. They spent the rest of the day hiking a moderate trail, stopping frequently to take photos, and even spotting a small family of deer along the way. Let's pause here for a couple more useful phrases. First, true to his word, which means someone did exactly what they promised or said they would do. Try this sentence. True to her word. She called me back exactly at 9 o'clock. Repeat. True to her word. She called me back exactly at 9 o'clock. Next, wait it out, which means to patiently wait until a difficult or inconvenient situation passes or improves, rather than trying to force a solution immediately. Try saying, "The traffic was terrible, so we just decided to wait it out at a nearby cafe." Repeat. We just decided to wait it out at a nearby cafe. Beautifully done. You're really building a natural, flexible vocabulary today. That evening, exhausted but happy after a full day of hiking. Jake and Priya cooked a simple dinner together in the cabin's small kitchen. Pasta with a jar of sauce they'd picked up at a gas station along the way. Nothing fancy, but somehow it tasted absolutely perfect after such an active day outdoors. As they sat by the fire afterward, Priya mentioned how grateful she felt for the friendship they had built over the years, and how trips like this one reminded her just how important it is to step away from screens, deadlines, and daily stress, even just for a weekend. Jake agreed completely, adding that he already wanted to start planning their next trip before this one had even ended. By Sunday afternoon, as they packed the car to head back to the city, both of them felt a familiar mixture of emotions. A little sad the weekend was ending, but genuinely refreshed and recharged, ready to face the coming week with a clearer, calmer mindset. As Jake pulled out of the cabin's driveway, Priya turned to him and said, "Same time next month?" Jake laughed and said, "Absolutely. Wouldn't miss it." One final phrase from this part of the story: refreshed and recharged. A wonderful way to describe that feeling of renewed energy after rest, relaxation, or time away from your normal routine. Try this sentence. After a relaxing weekend at the beach, I felt completely refreshed and recharged. Repeat. I felt completely refreshed and recharged. Now, before we officially close out today's episode, I want to share a few honest thoughts with you. Learner to learner, because I know how challenging this journey can sometimes feel. Learning English, especially at the B1 level, often comes with a strange mix of emotions. Some days, you'll feel incredibly proud, noticing how much easier certain conversations have become, how much more naturally certain phrases come out of your mouth without you even having to think about them first. Other days, you might feel frustrated. Maybe you'll watch a movie without subtitles and realize you only understood about half of what was said. Or maybe you'll try speaking with a native speaker and suddenly forget even the simplest words you know perfectly well. Please know that this is not a sign of failure. This is simply what real language learning looks like for absolutely everyone. No exceptions. Fluency isn't a straight line. It's more like a winding path, sometimes going uphill, sometimes flat, and occasionally even feeling like you're moving backward, even though you're truly not. The most important thing you can do, more important than any grammar rule or vocabulary list, is simply to keep showing up, keep listening, keep speaking out loud even when nobody's around to hear you, and keep giving yourself credit for how far you've genuinely come, even on the difficult days. I truly believe that consistency beats intensity every single time. Listening for 15 focused minutes every single day will take you so much further than listening for 3 hours once a month. So, if you can, try to make this podcast part of your daily routine, even if it's just one episode during your morning commute, while cooking dinner, or right before bed. Your brain absorbs language best through repetition and consistency, not through occasional bursts of intense studying. And that brings us to the end of today's full practice episode here on English in Fluency. Let's do one final review together before we wrap up completely. Throughout today's episode, we practiced heavy traffic, residence, move forward with, and reserve spots from our news story. We practiced just browsing, reliable, without even thinking twice, feel truly comfortable, and somewhere you truly belong from our short story about Maria and her bicycle. And finally, we practiced weather cooperates. Are you in extra layers? First thing, leaning toward a little break from routine. And I've got that covered. All from Jake and Priya's weekend trip conversation. That's a lot of useful, natural English. And if you practiced speaking each one out loud with me today, you are already one step closer to sounding more fluent and more confident. I want to encourage you to listen to this episode again tomorrow, maybe even a third time later this week, because repetition is truly the secret ingredient to real fluency. Your brain needs to hear these patterns multiple times before they become automatic, before they become part of how you naturally speak without even having to think about it. So don't worry if you didn't catch everything perfectly on the first listen. That's completely normal. And honestly, that's exactly how language learning is supposed to work. One small suggestion before you go. Try keeping a simple notebook, either on paper or on your phone, where you write down just 3 or 4 phrases from each episode that stood out to you personally. Don't try to write down everything. That usually feels overwhelming, and you end up reviewing nothing at all. Instead, choose only the phrases that felt most useful or most interesting to you, and then make a habit of using at least one of them in real conversation sometime during the following week. Whether that's with a coworker, a friend, or even just talking to yourself while cooking dinner, language that you actually use, even just once, tends to stick in your memory far longer than language you only hear passively. Over time, these small choices add up into something much bigger, a genuinely confident, natural command of English that feels like your own, rather than something borrowed from a textbook. Thank you so much for spending this time with me today. I know your time is valuable, and I never take it for granted that you chose to spend part of your day here with me on English in Fluency. Whether you listen to this episode during your commute, while exercising, while cleaning your home, or simply sitting quietly with a cup of tea, I hope these 30 or so minutes felt genuinely worthwhile. And I hope you finish this episode feeling just a little more confident than when you pressed play. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider sharing it with a friend who's also learning English. Because honestly, learning together with someone else makes the whole journey so much more enjoyable and so much more effective. You could even suggest listening to the same episode separately during the week, and then meeting up, in person or on a call, just to practice using a few of today's phrases together, out loud, in an actual conversation. That kind of small, shared accountability tends to make a real difference over time. Until next time, keep listening, keep practicing, and most importantly, keep believing in your own progress. This is Alex, signing off from English in Fluency, and I'll see you in the next episode.